Hi, I'm Dr. Ira Lawrence. I am a board-certified internist and immunologist and a medical consultant for Botanix Pharmaceuticals. It has been my great pleasure to develop drugs in dermatology for the last 25 to 30 years, including some of the number one drugs in their space in dermatology. There are many unmet needs in dermatology, especially in the most common diseases. We think of diseases like acne, rosacea, atopic dermatitis, and psoriasis being the most common. And many of the drugs we've heard about recently that are major breakthroughs were in fact developed for patients with severe disease, that is very widespread, complicated, life-altering diseases. Unfortunately, the vast majority of patients with these common diseases have mild or moderate disease. And in many cases, they're not appropriate candidates for these new, very powerful, often systemically active, but often associated with attendant adverse events. So what we really have is an unmet need of the most common patients, those with mild to moderate disease that really haven't had anything new to treat their diseases probably in the last 20 or 25 years. Safety is first and foremost the most important factor in a dermatology drug. As we know, in many cases, diseases like heart disease and cancer, the patient's life is threatened, so you're willing to compromise safety in order to get the effectiveness you want. That's not the case in dermatology. Many of these diseases are life-altering. The patients are not happier and may be miserable, but they're not going to be life-threatening. In addition, many of the most common diseases that we are treating in dermatology affect young people. Atopic dermatitis or eczema affects children, often down to the age of 2, and acne affects primarily young adults and adolescents. So there especially, we're very focused on making sure that these drugs are safe, that they're easy to use and convenient, and also, of course, that they're effective. And not only for the patients, but also in many cases for the caregivers as well, who have to provide these drugs. So we look at two factors, both the safety and the efficacy, and then also the ability to deliver these drugs in a way that's convenient for both the caregiver and the patient. That's very important too, and that can help with some of your safety as well, because a drug that is delivered topically, for example, which the skin lends itself to very easily, does allow you to treat in a very small area, which many of these mild patients only need to treat small areas. And very importantly, when it's topically applied, you're focusing to the area that needs to be treated without a systemic exposure. So again, ideally looking for a drug that's effective but not systemically active to give you the best possible safety profile. Research, but primarily anecdotal. And we have seen recently much greater basic science research looking at the effectiveness of CBD in a number of parameters. And two of these in particular are extremely important in the area of dermatology. That is that CBD has both very potent anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties. And why is that important? Well, in many of the most common skin diseases that we've talked about, including acne, rosacea, atopic dermatitis, and psoriasis, there are two important components that cause these diseases. One of them is inflammation or an abnormality in inflammation, and the other is an alteration in something we call the skin microbiome, which are those organisms that live on all of our skin. And in the cases of many of these diseases, one or both of those mechanisms are abnormal. In the case of inflammation, they may be having too much inflammation. And in the case of the skin microbiome, there may be abnormal or too much of a normal skin bacteria that may be causing the disease. CBD has both anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial properties, so it's ideally suited to really treat a lot of these underlying mechanisms that are causing these common diseases. And very interestingly, recently we know that CBD is also able to be delivered topically, which is a very exciting opportunity. In the right formulation, it can be applied directly to the area of the skin that is involved. You're not getting the systemic exposure, so the safety is very good, and we know the safety is excellent with CBD as a whole. But I think, as I've mentioned earlier, the ability to really focus on those patients with mild to moderate disease that maybe have only a small area of involvement, but being able to deliver a drug that hits the two key mechanisms causing the drug or the disease to happen, which is inflammation and microbiome abnormalities, makes it an ideal candidate, I think, and one that certainly merits a much further and greater research. Acne and acne rosacea are two very common problems in dermatology that are almost completely due to those two mechanisms. We know that in both cases, there are abnormal bacteria. In the case of acne, something called, that we used to call P. acnes, we now call C. acnes. And in the case of rosacea, an abnormality in something called staph, and another group of microorganisms called skin mites. And in both of those cases, those abnormalities lead to an inflammatory response. So as you can see, as we've already talked, you're seeing a combination of both abnormalities in the skin microbiome and an inflammatory response, which is what causes the disease to occur. In the cases, as you know, in acne, you get the inflammation, you get the skin blockage, and the development of papules, pustules, and other acne lesions. And in the skin, in the case of the skin and acne rosacea, because of this inflammation, you also see what is very commonly seen, which is redness and inflammation, which to many patients that suffer from that disease, the most bothersome component. So why is that important? Because again, if you look at the components we've talked about, CBD hits both of those very well and has the ability of also being applied topically. So again, kind of an ideal candidate, at least to be pursuing, to look at. And I think what's most exciting to me is when I look at companies like Botanix, their commitment to doing excellent science. They're really taking this beyond the anecdote, to taking it to look at it from a clinically rigorous scientific approach to really answer the questions in a well-designed clinical trial to assess two important aspects. One, is this effective? And then most importantly, is it also safe, especially in the population that we're studying? So I think, again, an exciting time, and I think a really CBD is poised, I think, to do really exciting things in the next several years in the space in dermatology, which is an area that I think really is looking for new and novel breakthrough products. That CBD has often had a great deal of mythology, and I think what you're seeing now is that move from mythology and anecdotes to true science. And I think that's a very exciting thing and something that Botanix is committed to, which is taking this to the next level. And I think that's something very important, and I'm very proud to be associated with them because of that. I am first and foremost a scientist, both as an internist and immunologist, and also an experienced drug developer. And I think what makes a good drug company effective and successful is using the science as the basis of everything that they do. And that's something Botanix is really committed to doing. I know the team very well. They're highly qualified scientists, and most importantly, they're highly committed to doing this right.